When you start shorting people and not doing what's right, it's going to come back around.
Welcome back, investor. We've got another episode of Passive Income Adventures. We got Heather Ewing today from Wisconsin.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Emma.
Now, I'm really looking forward to this because when we're talking, I love the conversations we have before and after. We spent some time talking about commercial real estate and investing in commercial real estate, not just from a passive standpoint, but then operator and then you as a commercial broker. And so many topics came up about some of the untruths in the industry or it's going to be a conversation where we're just seeing through the bull in this industry. So thank you for coming on. How about you introduce yourself and then we'll get to the juicy bits later.
Definitely. Well, thanks for having me on, Emma. It's a true joy. Heather Ewing with Abstract Commercial Real Estate. We are downtown Madison, Wisconsin, so nestled in the beautiful Midwest. And we're a niche brokerage firm for retail, leasing, also restaurants with an emphasis in mixed-use developments. A lot of representation of landlords, developers, and we cherry pick different tenants and buyers. I always say that I am homegrown. So I've grown up in the area. I cut my teeth 10, 11 years ago in commercial and then started Abstract 4 years ago. It's really fun to watch the growth and the momentum in an area that I love.
Yeah, you mentioned that you've been doing this full time for 10 years. Can you take us back a little bit farther than that? Like what was your previous career looking like? How was it part-time real estate? Like how long were you doing part-time, then you jumped in full-time and then kind of catch us up to today?
Definitely. So I frequently joke that I'm kind of like a bull in a china cabinet. When I make my mind up on something, it's full speed, 200%. Backing it up, post-college, I ended up in operations management, a completely different arena. I'm a pretty creative person, but I love numbers as well. I was in manufacturing plants for 11 years, castings factories, things like that, prioritizing overseas buys, negotiations. Then I went through an early midlife crisis in my 30s and I had a really bad car accident. It was life altering. And that's when I started wondering, what do I want to do with my life? And I joke that I had the early questions of who am I? Why am I here? All of this. So that led to several years of trying different arenas from personal fitness to art. I have oil painted for years, coaching. And the interesting thing is I ended up with a part-time job at the First Weber Group in downtown Madison to balance my art business. So I have 2 college degrees. So it was a big step down of being an admin, right?
Yeah.
But I was the type, again, I was driven for my art business that I'm like, I will do this as a way to have a little bit of continuous income. So I ended up loving the group. I got my sales license. I never did work for them, but it started a spark. And I was like, this is pretty fascinating, right? People pretty much run their own lives. It's a fun group. They're an entertaining group, really nice camaraderie. And so I wanted to get into brokerage and I went into property management. For myself, everyone's wired differently, not a dream come true by any means.
Yeah.
But, whatever, each personality is unique. So anyways, I was in that for both residential and then commercial and finally had the ability then to utilize my broker's license that I had obtained. I wagered the mothership and utilized my 401k as a single person, self-funded, and that's how I got into retail and restaurants. So it's something that's very near and dear to my heart. And I think, some people are better at phasing things in, others are better at just an abrupt beginning and end. So I think it's really understanding yourself and what's going to work for you.
Yeah. Take me back into what you said. It's like when I do something, I do it 200% because I'm the same way. And so I'm very careful about what I commit to. And sometimes it takes me a long time if I'm going to do this thing. We mentioned on the podcast before we started recording, it's like the first year of the podcast that everybody told me it's just going to be a waste of time because you're not going to get any leads off of it and all that. And the end of the second year is where you start to get some traction. And so it took me probably 2 or 3 years that I could have been building the podcast. So by the time I finally was like, I got to do this, I'd already spent 2 or 3 years that I could have been building it. So have you found that when do you decide quickly? Because you know this about yourself that you're going to attack it. Do you have to go
Mhm.
through that thought process of, do I really want to do this? Because if I commit, it's committed.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you think about it. I'm a single person. I was utilizing my 401k. There was no backup, right?
Hmm.
There wasn't a spouse, there wasn't a live-in partner. My family, I love my family, but that was not a resource either. So in that sense, I think it's one of those I learned early on some of life's challenges can be a real virtue on the back end, but my mom had passed when I was younger. So I was also very independent and we were raised that way. So fast forwarding 30 years, making so many of my own decisions and having to think for myself and also having to be resourceful to be able to do different things, that all of that started decades earlier. And then you just see it really coming into fruition 10 years back. And then also of learning early on that people are always going to have their opinion. And it used to really sway me. Not that I'm invincible by any means, because people that I really care about, family, close friends, I do value people's opinions. That matters. But I also have learned over the years that I have to trust myself. And I always say to people, at the end of the day, you lay your head on the pillow. You're either happy or you're not, and it's up to you to make that one change the next day, typically incremental, but to do what you need to. Since this was such a big decision, I did think about that for a while because it has serious consequences. And when I look back, man, there was a lot of challenges, but I'm also the type of you focus on what's your next step versus wallowing in a fear or self pity. So you have to know yourself. And I think anytime you're a 1099 or have your own firm or whatever it might be, you answer to yourself the good, the bad, the ugly. And it doesn't matter what happened. At the end of the day, you're responsible. It's an endurance sport. That's why I
Yeah.
run.
Commercial real estate, especially. When I first started, I was buying some single families because we tried to buy a commercial property and the bank basically wouldn't give us a loan because for good reason. We didn't know what we were doing. We hadn't even had a single
Right.
rental house at that point. I had an offer of 14 unit building, I think. And I don't know why the broker thought I could buy that building. So I ended up backing out of that. And I said, I'm going to go get some single family so I can get some experience so that I can go commercial. I knew I wanted to go commercial right away, but I just didn't know what I was doing. And so it
Yeah.
took a little while to
Yeah.
transition. And I don't think at the time, though, I realized how important the broker was to my experience. I bought my first couple properties when I did buy commercial direct to seller. And then I had to run them and I didn't want to run them. And so I actually ended up partnering up with other people who would find the deals and then I would help out where I could raise capital, things like that. So I personally have worked with brokers on properties I didn't buy, but I've never, I'm trying to think, I don't think I've ever bought a property where I was the managing partner with a broker. And so a lot of those relationships and those connections that need to happen with the networking with the broker, I don't fully appreciate or understand because people bring me the deals and I don't even see the broker most of the time. So walk me through the process of what you do and what your role is in the real estate investing process for the owners. Because most of the people who listen to the show are passive investors. They have a business, they have
Right.
a job, and they want to learn as much as they can about it so that they can make informed decisions. And this is a
Right.
huge part of it.
Right.
A lot of people are even talking about how important that broker is to passive investor, even getting to the point where they have a deal to invest in. So walk me through that, educate me, pretend I'm 10.
Right. Well, and it's interesting, right? Because as in any arena, you hear about brokers. Others are, God bless my broker, they're going to be written into my will. So you have all different experiences.
Yeah.
But I think it's, as far as the way I run things, is you nailed it on the head. It's a lot of relationships, it's a lot of networking. Also, it's the people that we've served over the years. And that's where, when you go into any of our cell phones, you're going to have just a list. And a lot of times, mine are the landlords, the developers, some of the different tenants. I've lived in the area for about 50 years. So there's just a lot of ways to connect with people beyond brokerage. I had different careers, as I had mentioned before. I'm an avid marathon runner, so I connect with a lot of people through that as well, and giving back and donating time and all different things of that nature. So a lot of different plug-in points. So brokers are a great resource in that sense. Two, I always say if a broker is worth their salt, they're going to have a niche. If they don't, run.
Yeah.
Right? And here's my example for that. You can go to the doctor, and let's say you just have this horrible eye problem. Well, if you go to the podiatrist, they're a doctor, they're going to have one plan for you. And if you go to the ophthalmologist, they're going to have a very different plan for you. So they're both doctors, right?
Yeah.
Case in point with that. So I'm very big on going to the expert in whichever arena. You're not going to see me doing an industrial deal. I might do a tiny little, tiny 500, square foot office for a developer I work with, but I'm pure and pure. Also, with the mixed use developments, it's a different type of leasing than standalone properties, the strip centers, things like that. So, what I do is from all the deals in this niche, I'm able to bring that data, those metrics to an investor, to a developer. It's not infrequent that I'll talk to the bank and justify their loans because I have the tenure. This is what I anticipate. All of my deals are in this category, so I understand it. Also, if I'm negotiating for someone, I'm going to know how hard you can push and how much you can't. Also, having the relationships, that's how I bring in these different national groups. There's several people vying for a property. I get it because of the relationship. They know I can close, that I represent good people. So there's a lot of different touch points. Also, we're full service. So different municipal contacts, contractors, architects, signage, alcohol license, patio, all these different things. It's all the minutia that you don't hear about that a solid broker is going to have that experience. They're going to have the contacts, they're going to have the knowledge, and they'll be able to put it together. So I always say anyone can do a deal. Are you getting your lowest price, right? And the way I see it is we have a service, people can partake of it or not, and that's okay. But the right people will line up and they'll understand the value and they'll happily pay for the value because in the end, it's going to get them what they want at a better rate. And also, it's the relationships that I go out to and just say, hey, I know you were looking for something in this area. Here you
Yeah.
go. Yeah.
And the direct to seller, I just think of one while you were talking. Like my development deal that we did was with a broker. She
Mhm.
brought it to me. I ended up knowing the sellers already because it's a small
Right.
world, right? And even that was
Right.
sale. So it was kind of one of those weird structures where they had it under contract. They were planning to sell the contract and they had the broker go market that contract and then I bought it. So there were a lot of people to pay along the way. I paid her, I paid the wholesalers.
Mhm.
And what you mentioned there about, "Oh, we don't wanna pay the broker, we don't wanna pay the fee." To me, that's like saying, "I don't wanna pay a contractor, so I'm gonna go swing this hammer myself." It's ridiculous. I
Right.
don't want to pay a mortgage officer the origination points or their fee, their closing costs. So I'm gonna go out and approach these life insurance companies or pension companies myself and get my own mortgage. Like, it's ridiculous to think that we are going to cut out essential people in this process to save a little bit of money because what are we an expert at? We're an expert at.
Right. And I mean, are you really saving money? Probably not. Once in a blue moon, someone negotiates a really solid deal
Mhm.
without a broker. Those are minimal because usually you're losing out on some facet where it may not be a direct financial impact, but down the road in a few years you're going to pay for it. And
Mhm.
at the end of your investment, are you ahead?
Yeah.
So again, every once in a while I'll see a good deal, but typically I shake my head and I've wondered at times too of like, and I'm not going to say anything because I don't want them to have heartburn and not sleep again on what they left on the table, what they missed, why something's important, why you'd want to do an environmental and they never thought of it,
Mhm. Oh,
especially in the area that they went into. And it's like, oh God, yeah. And that's where you hear too of like, oh, all you did was pick up the phone and make a call. Right.
yeah.
Because it was years of creating relationships and that's how I knew about the property.
Well, I think that you do get that criticism a lot of times because even like a residential realtor, same thing. They'll say like, "Well, what did they do?" They got on the MLS and showed me some houses. I used to be a real estate photographer, and so I had MLS access to get doors unlocked, and so when we would be house shopping for ourselves, I could get into any house I wanted and schedule my own showings, right? I
Mhm.
didn't my realtor was like, "You're the easiest client ever. I don't even have to find properties for you, and I don't even have to take you there. You, like, let yourself in and take care." So I was taking care of all of that. But then he made a comment towards the end of it. He said, "I thought this was gonna be the easiest commission I ever made, and then all of a sudden the deal got hard." The negotiations got very tense. The deal fell through 2 or 3 times. By the time he got that to the finish line, I guarantee he earned his commission because he was doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes that I did not know how to do when things started falling apart, and I started leaning on him more and more in the transactions for when we're buying something. And that's when I realized the good ones are marketing your
Mhm.
property hard, they're negotiating hard, they are specialists, and they're doing a lot behind the scenes. People are like, "Oh, I don't want to pay my realtor their commission." And the same thing extends to brokers. But when was the last time you saw a property that wasn't like mom and pop level? It was an institutional grade property that you went direct to seller for. Does that even happen? And if I want the bigger properties, I have to go through a broker. You have all of that in your pocket. I don't.
Well, and residential and commercial are just two very different arenas, in the sense of it's funny because people either like one or the other. Very different personalities typically, and also the deal terms. It's just a very different animal. And occasionally I'll connect with a residential broker and they're just in over their head because they don't know the arena. And that's where I tell people too of send the referral. You'll make your percent, give the referral because if you genuinely care about your client, you're going to do what's in their best interest. And even if you don't want to, that's your fiduciary duty.
Yeah.
Just like you're not going to see me trying to do some type of big office deal. I'm not touching industrial. Like, I am happy to field that call and be like, yes, this is who you want to talk to. Send them on.
Yes,
It's
to that.
really, it brings us kind of that point, Emma, of knowing your skills,
Mhm.
where you can contribute and where you really need to pass it on. And I think it's also that emotional IQ and your fiduciary duty of putting the client first. And I think that can get lost in the shuffle.
Well, you mentioned how you don't want somebody who specializes in everything because then they specialize in nothing, right? But what you
Right.
mentioned there about when you're going to pass it up the ladder as a referral, that's
Hmm.
because you don't need that sale to pay your bills. You don't need that sale to eat. That's a lot of why people don't because they're in a dry spell and they'll take on something that they don't know how to do because they'll get a referral fee if they pass it along, right? But then that brings in control and they're going to make more if they can sell it themselves and they get greedy because they're desperate.
Yeah, I would fight you on that. I think it comes down to your ethics.
Okay.
I have been in that position in the past. The golden rule, not to sound corny, but your name is everything. And I think when you start shorting people and not doing what's right, it's going to come back around. I fully believe it in life. I've went and had hard conversations with people and worked out different things to merge the gap versus putting my ethics, my name, and doing the right thing. To me, there's not a choice for that for me. Everyone's different. And at the end of the day, like I said, when you put your head in the pillow, you're the one answering. It doesn't matter what Joe, Harry, Sally, what their opinions are. Internally what's right and what's not. And that's when I say, get creative to merge the gap.
That's such a good answer because when somebody's desperate and they're taking on something that they're underqualified to do because they need the money,
Yep,
that is a breach of their own ethics. So
it
because
is.
they're putting the financial decision ahead of the health of the client, especially if the client is a little bit newer to it. I've worked because sometimes a broker comes with a deal, right? Like it's I found it and it's already attached. And I don't think that broker knows what they're doing, but I have to figure out how to work with them. I've been on the other side of things as well. And I feel like, can this broker please pass this up the ladder to somebody who knows what they're doing? Because again, it's not just somebody showing properties around. It's all those details you mentioned like you got to run an environmental. If it's a beginning investor and their broker's not guiding them through this process, it can often turn into those horror stories that you hear about because you know more about your transaction volume is going to be so much higher than mine over the lifetime of our commercial real estate experiences. And you know the pre and the immediately post and the pre-sale way more than I'm ever going to know it just because of that volume that you're doing. And you're seeing things and hearing stories because you are friends and colleagues with so many investors. So tell me the kinds of things that you're doing on the front end that makes you earn your commission that
Yeah.
most people might not even know about or even think about.
If you don't like the broker, I would have a conversation and work with a different broker.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
that's
great.
the one thing of everything is negotiable in the deal, right? And that's where too, if they brought you a site, I would talk with them and just like, hey, I don't feel we're communicating, or have just bring it up.
Yeah, because
Because
they're listing
I
it.
don't,
It's
yeah,
their
there's
listing.
no
It's
reason
make
why you should
program.
work with someone that you feel like doesn't know what they're doing, or maybe they're great, but they're just really abrasive and you dread picking up the phone,
Yeah.
right? There's always ways of structuring things of like, hey, I'm going to give, what if you get this percent? We're going to bring in this other person. There's always rooms to get creative in that sense. And I think that's one of the things I love about commercial real estate is that there is no same deal. You pull from so many different deals, whether it's a local, national, regional group, food, retail, all these different arenas. There's so much to pull from. And at the end of the day, it's what can we get both sides to agree to? Everyone's going to have some pain points they're going to have to work through, but it's all an original work of art.
Okay, so this is actually kind of an answer to the question that I asked of those things that you're doing, because one thing that surprised me when was in residential properties versus commercial properties is there's no buyer's agent, seller's agent. It's not like they have their agent and then I bring in my agent. They show me around properties and then the agents talk to each other. It seems like it's more like this broker is on this property and you as a buyer deal with the seller's broker. And I just don't like that situation. So, but it sounds like you're saying that that's not how it actually works.
So what happened?
Want a broker and he got upset because I wanted to bring in my own. And he's like, that's, it was not a good situation.
Yeah. So, you know, I don't know about your state, but in commercial, it gets pretty cutthroat at times, right? And that's where a lot of people that don't understand it can get taken for a ride like you were, unfortunately.
Mm. Yeah, because I did
There
not.
are buyer brokers,
Okay.
there's the listing broker, and everyone negotiates their deals differently, their listings. But yes, you legally can, and it's a problem that was not disclosed, which is
True.
quite typical for a lot of people.
That was way at the beginning. It was one of those deals that I was swinging above
Right.
weight class in and looking to him for some education. I
You got
just
educated, just not
yeah,
in the
I looked past the
right.
mess. Yeah, and that was I'm not even sure if I had a commercial deal at that point. I might have had 1 or 2 at that point. But the world of brokers as you get into larger properties is very different than the world of direct to seller and things like that on the smaller
Mhm.
multi-size properties. It was a whole new language. And as we scaled up our property acquisitions, like I said, getting into that broker network was so powerful because I would call up brokers and I would say things like, I want this, 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 and this. And you could almost hear them laughing, like, yeah, you and every other unicorn seeker. And I just didn't know what's normal. I didn't know and I'm some newbie who called and there was just not a lot of respect there. So walk me through that process of when you are talking to a buyer and same thing, like they know you can close. That's why you get the listings. But what do you do with a buyer that you're feeling like, how do you help somebody get started without holding their hand? Because you hold a lot of hands, right? How do you know when this person's just wasting your time and they're not going to be able to close?
Yeah, yeah. So for me, I'm a very direct person, and so I find it much easier. So I also tend to attract very decisive people.
Mm,
They're either in or out. And unfortunately, also what happens is in the brokerage arena, a lot of people that aren't established, they don't get a call back. It's how it works typically, right? I probably return a lot more calls, but I also like to give people one next step,
mhm.
because again, I kind of see it as I'm going to need assistance. You never know when you need help, right? And if you give someone the next step, that's going to help them, right? So I kind of feel like that's my thing. But it's talking about what they have for their build out, what they have available, what they have access to. That's in a first call. Some people are very turned off by that, others aren't. And that goes back to my early days. If I didn't have those uncomfortable conversations in the beginning, I would spend time and we'd do this. And then all of a sudden, oh, so and so helped me with the deal over here. And it was like, what? You know, I pulled all this data for you. We went through the psychographics, demographics. I connected you with the city, right? And so, again, you learn through the hard knocks. I joke that I am a soft person, but I also have a really solid backbone and I have an opinion. And that's been developed over 10 years. And you also realize typically how to spot people that are just a lot of talk versus people that genuinely want to take the action and close on something. So it's doing the due diligence. They've got the funding, they have their timelines, they have an understanding, or if they're brand new to it, I create a team with them. So I connect them with the architects, the contractors, the signage companies. I give them the time flow. I probably do a lot of managing the flow, and that goes back to my 11 years in operations, just because it helps to close deals more quickly. And when they get what they want, I get what I want. And it's a really nice way to connect with people. And I feel like those are relationships for lives because you just help them embark on something big, and that's important. And with the bigger nationals, it's a thank you, but it's also the pride in doing the deal and knowing that they turn to you versus another firm or another broker. It's nice to be able to see those investments get built out, developed. And again, going back to that, I am a very creative person. I really like seeing that the landscape has changed, improved people's lives, and also the community has some of these different venues to experience new foods, new resources.
Catch me up for because this experience that you have in brokering and figuring out what is going on, how to buy a property, your transaction volume, all the things you've learned from that, and the network you developed from that. I've sat at closings with mortgage officers, with brokers, title officers, where they make a comment like, I sit on the other side of this table in these transactions, and I'm always wondering, how do I get on your side of the table? Because they want to be owners or they want to be investors, and they know they've got the knowledge because they're this close to it every single day, especially in a commercial shop. Tell me about your process of looking at the other side of the table and thinking to yourself, do you want to get over there as an investor? If so, why? And if so, what are you doing about it? And if not, again, why? What is it about these two different things, people who work so closely together? You'd seem it would be like a natural crossover, but it isn't. Tell me about that.
Yeah, definitely. So I've had a lot of leasing. I do a lot of leasing deals. And the interesting thing with that is, unlike sales, it's typically not published. Or what you see in CoStar, there's a few people that report it, but in my years, I've never reported any deal terms. And that also, at least locally, brokers don't publish that because that's your king to the castle right there. And that's also where then for an investor, their performas, that's going to be a big difference between what you actually get versus what you anticipated on your return. So with that, in the past, I've worked with a lot of clients that were developers, investors, and I used to just turn it over. And then I took my CCIM classes and got my designation, and I was just like, whoa, 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 whoa. There is way too much money on the table.
Yeah.
And I was just like, all right, I'm late to the party, but it's better late than never. And I think that's really important for people to remember. Just because you don't have a multi-million portfolio, or maybe you haven't taken your first step, use this podcast, use resources to start opening your mind and learning of what are some of the next steps. So I think definitely I plug in differently. For me, it's all commercial. I love commercial. Residential does not speak to me for multifamily, but I know it's people are crushing it, which is great. So for me, I am putting together my investment group, and it's exciting. It's daunting, right? Sometimes you think you've got a team, and then you don't. But the nice thing is I've got a great guy that I worked with prior years, also local. He knows the construction, the performance really well. I know the brokerage really well. We both have a ton of great relationships here in the Madison-Dane County area. And we also plug in beyond, but this is where we reside, and it's where we really have our niche experience. So in that sense, I am looking for capital investors. I get phone calls from developers, investors all over the nation, just because I know what I know, but I'm also very clear on what I don't know. So that's where, to me, I'm like, well, let's create the team and bring in the experts from the different areas to create a strong team. And I think it's important that people remember, just like any deal, it's all different, of taking that vantage point to creating your investor team or however that shakes out. So I'm in the process. I actually had a call this afternoon with a group, and I think it's really making sure that they're vetted of, do they have deliverables for what they're sharing their expertise is.
Mm,
Just like with different properties, the environmentals, maybe it's a phase two, maybe you blew past phase one and two and you're at three. Of it's doing the due diligence, taking the time up front, because otherwise you'll spend it on the back end. One, you don't want the disappointment. Two, our time's valuable, right? When you take a look at the number of hours of investigating, having the phone calls, checking sites out, seeing what type of value add, or if you're going to tear it down and develop up the municipal approvals, things of that nature, you can spend a lot of time, and that equates to dollars. So I think that's something that's always very apparent of how I'm spending my time, who I'm spending my time. A lot of that goes back to the days of operations of, where's your big rocks, and make sure you put things in a good plan. There's always going to be tweaks, but react, think on your feet, and deliver. So I have a high bar for myself, and I expect that from others too.
so for the listener who does not know what is CCIM, can you explain the difference between that designation and how that shifted your perspective on investing versus actively transacting deals?
Right, definitely. So CCIM is a certified commercial investment member, and there's about 5 or 6% of the population that has it. So it's very highly regarded and valued. And it's quite a rigorous group of studies, individual tests, accumulative. You have to have a certain dollar amount within a portfolio of your deals with proof
Mhm.
of that. And so there's a lot of different ways. There's also opportunities if you're in your SIOR designation and things like that. So there are some shorter ways of getting through, depending on your, if you want to say, pedigree in the real estate arena. But the nice thing about that for me was it really opened my eyes to opportunities, also a lot of different people and making different connections. And actually, this afternoon it was with one of the fellow designees that I was with a few years back in Milwaukee. So I think it's really an in-depth look about the investing, the depreciation, and just working it through the system of understanding that. And so I still like working with someone else for my performas. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to also identifying what you enjoy, and if there's something that someone else can do really well, I'm all for outsourcing it. So again, I am more of a creative person, but it's the relationships that I really hang my hat on, and connecting the people with that. It's a great designation. I'm the chair for Wisconsin, and you can learn a lot. It's truly limitless, and that's what I love about commercial real estate. It's an endless area to learn, to grow, to expand, and no one's ever going to know it all. Be clear about what you know, what you don't know, and be forthright.
Yeah, we were talking before we started recording about
Yes.
my
Yes.
deal when I did not know what I was doing. And our investors that came in to invest with us, it was very clear that this was our first deal. But we had a vision and a program. They believed in what we were doing and they wanted to help us build it. Most of them were already retired on their passive income. They were kind of getting to that point where they wanted to do more than just get high returns. It was a high return deal, yes,
Right.
but they wanted to help us build our company, build our vision because they knew that we were going to go somewhere. I don't know how they knew that, right? But most of our investors are that way. And I felt I was always very clear and upfront about, like you said, you know what you're good at, and you know what you're not good at. And being able to communicate that effectively is really key. You said a couple of things there, like your network, you may not know how to do it, but you know someone who does, and your willingness to bring people into the team and
Right.
share the pie to get something
Yeah.
done. I just wish more people thought like that. It was like we were talking about before, you're cutting out the broker because you don't want to pay the fees and you don't know what
Right.
you're doing, right? And then you get into the situation and you're like, oh, well, we're not an expert in blank, but I know someone who is. Let's see if we want to work with them. So building that team and making sure all those personalities
Mhm.
get along and everybody's being honest and forthright and communicating and doing what they say they're going to do. That's hard, but it sounds like that's something that you really excel at. Have you thought about that as like a skill set that you have that maybe other people don't have?
Well, I would say, it's something I've thought about. I think I'm a very resourceful person. And I think similar to yourself, right? Resourceful. And also being in commercial real estate for the past 10 years, there's a lot of direct, uncomfortable conversations over the years.
Yeah. It's a
And
stress.
that's part of the arena. And if you're not comfortable having these conversations, that you might want to look for a different area. So I think you did it perfectly. And I think that's where too I'm coming in saying this is what I really know well. This is where I need help. And if it's of interest, great. And if not, I always believe things will shake out. And I think what happens is people want to get this quick win, right? And they might get a quick win, but at the same time, what might be the liability down the road that as they're signing off on all the documents, they didn't utilize the broker, they didn't utilize the attorney, they didn't go through some of these phases because one, it wasn't on their radar or they didn't think it was important. But we see experiences across the board and there's some major price tags and also you add the money, and to me it's not worth it. I like to make sure that people are aware of it. How they choose to handle it is on them, but they need to be informed so they can make a choice for themselves and for their business and their investment.
There's a lot more going on, a lot more moving parts in commercial real estate because people ask me, like, what's the difference between commercial and residential real estate? Because multifamily
Everything.
is residential. Like people are living in a multifamily, yet it's considered a commercial property. I was like, okay, residential is single, double, triple, fourplex, four family, whatever you want, quad, whatever you want to call it.
Exactly.
That's residential, and that's not very many properties. And everything else is commercial.
Yep.
It's easy to diversify because there's so many things that you
Right.
can and still be in real estate, right? And so that creativity and that ability to think outside the box is really vital in commercial because there's so much more going on and so many more details. And I think in commercial, it's even more important to niche down because these are
Mhm.
very different asset classes. It's just not the same as residential.
No.
It's very
Well,
different.
and to your point, you can have a diversified portfolio, work with different brokers for each of the asset categories.
Mhm.
Perfect way to do it. The commercial brokers, again, if they're worth their salt, they're going to totally get it because they're going to know I do not know the numbers. It's almost like a nice litmus test. Is someone seeing one too many green dollars, or are they the type that you're going to create a long term relationship with and do different deals
Yeah.
over the years as you have an interest in that asset? So,
Yes. I've
yeah,
also seen, and I want to get into there's something I want to get into. We are talking about with like, no, we know each other from LinkedIn, but that reputation that people get when you know them online for a while and you've heard them on a podcast or maybe your podcast stalking them. This is something we all do before we invest with somebody or partner somebody. Sometimes it's not all that it's cracked up to be. And I have had many experiences where I'm talking to somebody who I know very well on LinkedIn, but we have a conversation
right.
and it turns out like they've never done a deal or they still have a job, or when they made it look like I'm financially free and I have this passive income and wouldn't you like financial freedom, but they're not financially free because
Yep.
some of the decisions that they've made and they're still having to work and they're kind of trying to keep things secret. But I always think everybody has a strength and everybody has a weakness. So I'll give you
Exactly.
when I see posts on LinkedIn, I don't know why, but the doctors really get me because they're in their scrubs or their surgical stuff. And they're like, oh, I help doctors invest in multifamily real estate or whatever. And I'm like, oh man. And they got all the letters after the name and they really know what they're doing. And good doctors just have like instant respect in our society. And I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, why would anybody want to invest with me? I'm just a stay at home mom photographer, right? And then I realized
Mm,
nobody is competing with that patient in the emergency room that's in front of them right now. And there's a huge amount of distraction. And I thought, I don't have that. I'm full time and my husband's full time. And our kids are
yeah.
older, so they don't really need all of this, attention. And that's an advantage to me. Like I'm not a doctor. I'm not tied up
Mhm.
in the ER. I'm not tied up worrying about malpractice insurance. And that's a huge advantage to me.
Right.
I've been trying to put that on a LinkedIn a little bit more because I feel like there's so much being covered up that we're not seeing and we're not thinking about how much people have actually done what they said they're trying to do or what they're promoting. They may have never have done it. They may have a lot of other distractions. So tell me about that experience for you as being somebody who's very active on LinkedIn. How do you cut through the bull? Who's what before you get too deep into a relationship or a project with somebody who's not suitable?
I think kind of like with a property, it's the due diligence of having the resume and actually vetting the resume to, you know, does it tie out?
Hmm.
Whether it's capital raising, whether it's deals done, things of that nature. Like how many of the deals were retail restaurant versus this other thing or industrial or office, right? So the proof comes down into the numbers. And I think if someone isn't forthright with that, they may not have to have it, all the tiny details available. But if they're uncomfortable providing that, that to me would probably, I'd wonder why,
Yeah.
right? Because if this is what you do, it should be pretty simple, right? And so I think something like that, and even getting a referral or different examples of where was, something that a deal went sideways, that went wrong. What did you learn from it? What was the result? Was there, did you ever have a transaction that went to court? All these different things. Have you fired a client? All different ways of just really vetting it. And I think too, it's easy to get caught up. And I think there is a lot of hype on all the different social medias. And I think too, more recently, I've been aware of more too, which is unfortunate. But at the same time, it is life, right? But I think when we vet things out, both through the commensurate work or experience and also that gut feel, I think that's really important. And I think also, like with your example, what a great example, Emma, of your full time, your husband's full time from your investments. And that speaks volumes. And I think the nice thing about that too is honestly, some of the women that I know that had the most children, like 5 children or several children, to deliver in the career, and they were always good, and also deliver at home. That's a special person. And again, it's deliverables. I personally could care less about titles. I'm interested in what can you deliver, what have you delivered. Some people are just titles and they like that, right? And I think too, if someone doesn't want to work with me, that's completely fine. And every once in a while, there's someone that I just don't think would be a good fit either, from a personality or maybe communication styles or what they're expecting. And it's finding the right fit. And I think it's okay if it's not a fit. I would much rather say no than to have the pain of a incongruent fit.
Yeah.
And, we've all had those in the early years or at different times. And I vet stronger now, but there are still surprises. So do your due diligence on partnerships and properties.
Yeah. And well, it's the same thing when you're doing a due diligence on a property up front. You're
Hmm.
going to learn some things the more you dig, but you're never really going to know until you buy it and you're actually managing the asset and something happens. I like the questions you had about have you ever had something go to court? Have you ever had
Hmm.
something go sideways? How did you handle it? Because it's all about being resourceful, thinking on your feet, being creative, and understanding category, even within, let's say you're going to stick in multifamily, even every multifamily building is different, a different vintage, different stuff. You just never know. And so I feel like being able to solve problems on your feet to me is extremely important. And
Hmm.
that ability, I, I don't know if that's learned or people get it. I don't know how to measure that. That's one of those gut checks that I do. Like, how does this person do under pressure and under stress? There's nothing to tell you that. Sometimes you just have to do a small deal with people and test them out,
Yeah.
see how it goes.
Yeah.
It's a very, very tricky soft skill of team building.
Go to, like I always say, everyone's had a gut hunch,
Yeah.
right? And I firmly believe everyone has. And I know when I've ignored them in life, I was more annoyed, I think, with myself
Hmm.
almost than the incident because I was like, God, in your core, you knew, right? And I think it's one of those as the years pass too of like, gotta trust that.
Well,
And so even if the numbers are looking really good, if something doesn't feel right, it's interesting because sometimes it takes months, sometimes it's years, sometimes you don't know. But I also think that that's an important part to utilize with the decisions. Heavy on the numbers, but also that gut feel.
yes. Well, they always say don't make emotional decisions in real estate
Mhm.
invest. And I feel like one way to not buy an emotion is to really know your numbers. People make all sorts of excuses why they don't know numbers in this industry, which to me is
Mhm.
inexcusable. Because a
Well, and
week,
ask for help,
yeah, learn how.
ask for help.
You should be able to
Yeah.
read your own pro forma, or when you're raising capital, you should know the numbers in your own pitch deck because there's a lot going on behind the scenes. The very
Yep.
basic numbers that you need to know in order to pitch it to an
Yeah.
investor. Why would you even
Yeah.
give those numbers to an investor if they don't need them to make a decision? And if they need them to make a decision, then you should know it. So being able to say, I'm weak in this, I'm strong in that, or whatever, and I need to fill in for these skills, those hard skills are very important, right? But the soft skills are
Yeah.
more important and more important. So have you set
Well, and I think that's where then the level of communication really comes in too, and the style, right? Some people will like direct, some won't.
hmm,
Some will want weekly meetings, some might want quarterly. And I think it's just really asking questions and flushing it out in the beginning. And then, kind of like with any good plan, sometimes there's going to be something that arises that you can't control. And that's part of real estate, right? You're never going to have all the answers. You're never going to have a complete heavenly experience through everything. There's always something to learn, something that you can gain, and right? And just like
yeah,
don't learn the same mistakes over and over. Like learn from them and implement them. And I think too, lean on the people that have strengths where you have weaknesses and keep that at the forefront as you're moving forward to create what you need to do and to have a good plan.
yes. I heard a great quote today. It was like, first you lose your edge and then you lose control. And I thought that's almost like the opposite of what we're normally hearing. It's like who, not how, play to your strengths and all of that. But that was like the opposite thing. Like, don't lose your edge. There's so many moving parts that you need to be able to keep track of. You can't be an expert in all of them. You can't specialize in all of them.
Yeah,
But as you're branching into this investment side of your own business for your own retirement, really, like
right. Yeah.
people start thinking about this, we're the Gen Xers, or that's what's on our mind all the time right now, right? And realizing like what you're an expert in and what you're not an expert in is very valuable, but also, like you said, like pushing yourself to expand and to learn those
Yeah.
skills. So, what skills are you having to push yourself a little bit? It's like maybe not your favorite thing to do, but you recognize that it's important, and you just got to make sure that you are taking care of business, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I would think, at times I get tired of prospecting,
Yeah.
honestly. But at the same time, I also see the benefits of it. And it's one of those I've prospected for years through cold calling, in person canvassing, networking from the industry, networking to others, to more community, like through chambers, things of that nature. Also through run groups. I've met several people through run groups, believe it or not. And I think tying in also mindset is also one of those really important factors that you have to be aware of.
Mhm.
Because to your point, if a deal is going sideways or there's some challenges, maybe with a return and other things, you have to keep people with the eye on the prize and also focusing on the good and creating a plan to merge the gap of wherever you're at.
Mhm.
So I think that's why distance running for me is such a big deal. But beyond prospecting, sometimes I genuinely enjoy it, times I don't. For me, it's having the right level of assistance within my firm. And that's something that I'm working to boost and to get some more help because I have a lot of different endeavors going on all around the retail restaurant and then the investment section. And it's really, I want to do more. I'm a very creative spirit, again, growth minded, and I want more, but I know I can't add more until I have more of these pieces fully functioning, and then I can continue to add more. So that's my opportunity for growth. I think it's one of those I've made myself uncomfortable every day for what feels like a lifetime. I force myself to do things that I don't want to do. I do it all in the pursuit of I believe in human performance of how much can I grow and how can I expand? How can I as I become more, help more people do something that they love within commercial real estate? And how can I beautify this area that I love and that I've grown up in and open people's eyes, right? So from karate to Toastmasters to rappelling to marathons, you name it. I just feel like I'm always pushing myself. So it's become a part of my lifestyle and who I am.
Yeah, and that kind of push us forward into your future a little bit because a lot
Right.
of the passive income adventure that we talk about on this show, I've had listeners tell me before, like, it sounds like more work than I thought. I mean, I really just don't want to work anymore. I just want to have money show up in my mailbox. And I'm listening to your show, and it's basically, oh, here, I'm going to run a business or I'm going to manage my portfolio. And it's more work than I thought. I thought it was just supposed to be passive. But when you craft your lifestyle about the things that you're talking about, like you're just always taking that next right step, like you said before, what is the next best step I can be taking? And saying, like, how can I push myself to do hard things? Like, that's the passive income lifestyle right there. It's are you in a space where you are learning, growing, and pushing yourself? Because if you don't, I mean, we all need breaks, right? We all like to go sit
Oh,
on a beach
definitely.
4 days, right?
Definitely.
But as a lifestyle, no. I didn't start this business because I needed the money. I started the business because I was bored and I wanted to help people, right? I'm like, look at all the people who changed my life by starting some
Right.
businesses. And now I get to go pay it forward and overshare on social
Exactly.
media and all of that to help people. So take me forward in your future. Like, where are you going from here? What does your lifestyle design look like? And what are you doing now to build that lifestyle over the next 10 to 15 years?
Definitely. Well, it's like 65 is really not that far away, but I think
Yeah.
I'm taking a lot of measures in life to find fulfillment. Have I fully gotten it? No. But is it a lot better? Yes. Am I doing something I love? Yes. Is there still a lot of growth? Yes. Am I a recovering perfectionist? But I think it's one of those for me. I really envision, I'm able to take several trips, and a lot of them are business, but I enjoy it. I like the people, I love learning. To me, it would be traveling the world, speaking on real estate, the empowerment it offers, the value of self expression, which is really important. The lifestyle it offers, I think it's one of the best self development tools you can ever embark
Yes.
upon. I mean, it tells you the good, bad, and the ugly real quickly. And that's why I feel like pretty, at this stage of the game, like I know my weaknesses, which I'm very clear about,
Yep.
and the strengths in that. But to me, it's doing those things with people that I love. When I decided to start my own firm, I mean, it's something I genuinely enjoy. I see doing fewer just big deals, doing the investing, and again, running marathons around the world and vacationing and the beach and painting and time with loved ones. I'm doing all of that on different levels now. So it would just be a greater amplification of that and continuing, like yourself, Emma, to pay it forward. And I think that's where people find the greatest fulfillment is a balance of the two.
Mhm.
And there's so many kind-hearted, wealthy people that worked really hard, whether you had to work for it or you received it. As long as you're happy and do good things with it, continue on. And I think, unfortunately, there's just a lot of jealousy or a lot of assumptions too. Of like, I remember hearing that, someone thought I was born with a silver spoon, which is really entertaining. Also, the beautiful thing with life is you realize that, they can think whatever they want with that. I had two jobs in high school, right? It was grit and determination. And I think that's why, too, early on, I had to learn how to be resourceful, how to fend for myself, how to make decisions. And it wasn't a matter if you wanted to do something or not. It's like if you want to go to college, you're going to have to pay for it. And that's what I did, right? Two college degrees. So it's a lifestyle and it's also a choice. And I think people give far too much of their power to others. And I think, unfortunately, in doing so, it dilutes their effectiveness and their joy. So, before I continue on this rant, that's in a nutshell. Step into your power, fess up if you mess something up, be clear about what your skills are, and do good and share it.
Yeah. One of my podcast guests told me recently, she's life begins at 50.
Yeah.
And isn't that true? Because you finally get to the
Yes.
point where you can start to make some of these decisions and you know
Yes.
what you want. You stop carrying so much what other people think about
Right.
who you
That's
and
why I keep going more blonde, Emma. There's a
blonde.
lot of white in there.
I know, I know my kids are like, Mom, when are you gonna cut your hair? And I'm like, well, it's growing out silver. And if I cut all this off, it's over. Like the game is over. So I feel like
Right.
as a deal, this is
Right.
a stressful industry. And it's definitely aged me in a lot of ways. But at the
Mhm.
same time, it's been a life changing, almost miraculous type of experience. And I am not
Yes,
overstating that. It has been, I, I, I don't even want to say like it's not for everyone because I feel like
I agree.
when you go to these business things and you're out and about with your wealthy friends or your wealthy colleagues or you're at a conference or something or a mastermind, how many of those wealthy people owned businesses and own real estate? 100% of them. 100%. Some of them made their money in real estate, others made their money in a business and then bought real estate, but they all ended up there eventually. And I'm sitting around, I'm looking at them, I'm like, well, this is the key. This is the answer
Yeah.
to the introspection, to the career shifting and developing new hobbies and embracing life. And you ended up here as well, business owner and real
Yeah.
estate investor.
Well, and what's interesting too is that, I mean, I had earlier businesses since 2007. So that's why when I started Abstract in 2020, it's not like it was, my first foray. I had learned, right, of with my art business and things of that nature of what worked for me, what didn't. I didn't prospect back then nearly to the amount I needed, even though it was a growing business in a down economy, especially for art at that time. But nonetheless, you can choose to dwell in things that you wished would be different, but it's really utilizing those experiences and helping yourself grow. Where do I need to strengthen my skill set? Where am I already solid? And it's utilizing that and moving it forward. And typically, when you see ultra successful people, it was not their first business. It might have been their
Sure.
third, their fifth, their 10th, right? But
Yeah.
that's something you don't hear about. It's kind of like there's so much press on of like, I quit my W 2 and now I'm a multimillionaire. Like it just happened. It
That's
can.
your lie.
That's rare, right? And I'm also a firm believer that it's not easy to start your own business and run it. And it's one of those, especially depending on your skill set, how you're wired. I mean, the disc profile will give you a pretty good idea if you're going to do well in the area or not. But then it's also like, what are you willing to give up to get? And everyone's wired differently. And I think that's why I love endurance is great for stress. And that's really where my endurance running began was getting into commercial as a way to offload the stress. And to me, I wanted to make sure it was a healthy way to offload it and something that I could feel good about. And I think there's a huge connection point to your energy level through what we eat, how we move, and obviously how we think. So it's there's a lot of different factors and it's know thyself and what do you want, and getting a mentor is huge. And I think that's going to really shorten your learning curve, is going to make it much more enjoyable. I wish I would have gotten a coach years earlier. I didn't until I started my own firm. That was the first time I had a coach. And I was just like, oh, Heather, honey, you could have eliminated a lot of headaches, a lot of stress, white hairs by doing that. But again, you don't know what you don't know. So I kind of like yourself, I think it's really important to promote the realness. It's not all glitz and glamour. There's a lot of hard knocks, and it's really how bad do you want it and what are you willing to do, and put yourself with the right people. It'll make a huge, huge difference, not only emotionally, but also financially.
Yeah. Oh, so well said. I mean, we need to go on one of those business trip masterminds together and hang out.
Yes.
Ton of like from the martial arts and the art background and the athletics and it just I don't know
Yeah.
all of the things I'm sure we could just sit around and talk about confidence
Yes.
and all this stuff for hours and hours. So I thank you for coming on. How do people get a hold of you? We get the bite-sized version of it. How can people find your podcast and how can people get in touch with you?
So my podcast is Heather Ewing, the CRE Rundown, and you can find me on LinkedIn at Heather Ewing.
Yeah, your podcast is much shorter than mine. I feel like I just want to sit around and have conversations on all ranging topics, but your podcast is the kind people are going to pop in and binge listen a couple episodes in a row. Mine, they got to break it up in a couple of days.
Exactly.
So,
Mine's like the appetizer. I like to introduce people, connect them, and then they're out.
all right, perfect. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And be sure to connect with us afterwards. It's all about networking, and I hope that we got that across, like when we were talking about how important it is to be networking with your broker and having the network of people that you need, especially to do these larger commercial projects and larger businesses. It's so important. So reach out after the show, like reach out to Heather, reach out to me at investwithemma.com. You can come to our Monday night meeting. If you are an active investor and you need a pitch deck, High Rates That Group. I guess High Rates That Group is sponsoring today's episode, right? So I do pitch deck design for people who are needing investor centric marketing to attract capital into their business. So would love to have a conversation with you. It doesn't matter which direction you're going, active, passive, whatever you're looking for, connect you with one of the guests from the show. Let's just have a conversation, figure out where you're going. Cause this is one of my strengths, is to figure out like where you belong in a team or which direction you should be going, being able to help you get some clarity on what you might want to be doing in real estate, whether it's active, passive, residential, commercial. It really is just a matter of talking to somebody who's done a lot of different real estate things and can kind of point you in directions that you may not have known about. So with Heather, and the question I always forget to ask, I always forgot to ask, why should people reach out to you after the show? So what benefit to them and what would be the ideal person to reach out to you afterwards?
My ideal person is someone that is looking for assistance with retail or restaurant leasing or sales. Awesome. And so if you're in a different market, I will know someone in your market that specializes in that arena. And of course, it's the Madison, Wisconsin connection. So a lot of that for investors as well.
Yeah, a lot of our listeners are running very active businesses that are outside of real estate, restaurant owners, they need office space, mixed use and all that. So it's very common that we have entrepreneurs listening to it and who need these kinds of services, or they know somebody who does. So reach out to Heather. Thank you so much for coming on and just talking about all the bull that we see in this industry and how to cut through it. Get to the good stuff. Get to the good part. Thank you for coming on.
Get your hip waders on.
Be sure to reach out and tell us about your next passive income adventure.
Thanks, Emma.